So, Bobby, you've been scheming again.
Still don't know what it is or where it comes from, but there's something there. Where'd you see all this, Bobby?
Transmitting live from Planet X. It's the Live from Planet X podcast. I'm your host, Zaire, the Planet X ambassador. Tonight's special guest, we have the UK's leading researcher on all things seeking the truth. Andy Thomas is back with us tonight. So lock your doors, close the curtains, but open your minds. Do whatever you gotta do, but just keep it locked to the Live from Planet X podcast. Let's go.
Sure.
All right. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Live from Planet X podcast. I am so privileged and humbled to have Andy Thomas back with us. Andy is one of the UK's best known authors and lecturers on unexplained mysteries and global cover-ups, and is the author of the acclaimed books The Truth Agenda and the new book Conspiracies. He also lectures on history and British folklore and speaks extensively in Britain and around the world of both alternative and mainstream events. Andy, welcome back and thank you for your patience.
Oh, it's good to be back. Thank you.
And you know, the last video that I did with you got a good response on YouTube. It's been burning through the digital underground. People really like the subject. I hope I bring some traffic to your website. And now, last time we were talking about the crop circles. This time, let's get into some of the conspiracies. There are a bunch of them out there. Any particular one you want to start talking about with first? Any particular one, or you want me to just grab one because there's a bunch?
There are many out there. I mean, we could start by saying this, that, you know, when some people talk about conspiracies these days, you know, they look down their nose and say, well, this only began with the invention of the internet. Well, that isn't true. And one of the things that, you know, I write about in the book Conspiracies, especially, as you'd imagine, is to go back in time, and you see that, you know, going back even thousands of years to the Romans, you find not only belief in conspiracies, but obvious conspiracies. This stuff's been around forever, basically. And there have always been people who've doubted authority. They doubt what they're told. And often it turns out they were right to doubt it. And you do get despots and tyrants that want a lot of power, and they control people by filtering information. And so, therefore, any information they don't like, they brand that a conspiracy theory and tell you not to believe it. And that's really where we are today. We're still in the same position, but we now have communication skills that are, of course, so much faster than anything we had in centuries past. And whereas years ago you might have heard about a conspiracy in a printed pamphlet, and, you know, distributed through the streets, now you're getting it within seconds of somebody posting it up on social media or wherever. So the actual message that there are conspiracies, that hasn't really changed. The medium has changed. And of course, that's why a lot of people would love to censor the internet, and they're trying by the day to do that and stop all this being talked about. Because of course, if people get too near the truth, well, then that's branded fake news, and they try and take it away from people. So, you know, that's where we are today, really.
You know, Andy, we were just talking off camera. You know, I was telling you about the video that I had sent you from David Wilcott. Now, in that video, when you have time, if you watch it, I'm sure if you have time, you'll find it in part of the video, what I was telling you about that stuff that's going to happen. Towards the end of the video, he was bringing up John F. Kennedy. Now, he said that John F. Kennedy knew about this global cabal and was trying to enslave humanity, basically. And he said that John F. Kennedy knew about all these advanced technologies that would basically do away with electricity as we know it, the way we get our electricity, also gas, petrol, fuel, things like that. He was saying that all these advanced technologies are about to be released to the public shortly after this cabal is taken down. So John F. Kennedy, you know, with his untimely passing, which was murder, there's been a lot of rumors about, you know, foul play and what took place with him. Now, one thing I want to bring up, I don't know if you've heard this, but they say when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, he was actually still alive in the hospital, and someone came into the hospital and killed him there. Have you heard that?
Well, I mean, there are, of course, famously so many theories about Kennedy. And I mean, it's a difficulty to know where to start, because you have arguments about the way he was shot, who shot him, how many people were shooting at him. And then, as you say, you've got this issue of some of the autopsy photographs. Some people believe either do not show Kennedy at all, but another body, or they believe that the body was tampered with to try to cover up evidence of where the shots were coming from. Because some say that the damage to his head did look very like the shots had come from the front, but we are told that they came only from the back, from the alleged lone gunman, Lee Harvey Oswald. And so you've got that side of it. There are some people who do believe that Kennedy was alive still when he was taken into the hospital. I think if you look at the footage that famously we have of the shooting, I think if he was alive, there wouldn't have been much left of him to be doing a lot, because you can see the poor man's head exploding in that film. So I think the odds that he would have survived for long anyway, for anybody that thinks they killed him in the hospital, I don't think there would have been much left of him to be very coherent. So, but there's a lot of theories. There are so many arguments, and it never goes away, and it won't go away, because of course, some of the official investigations just ignored so much contrary evidence. And you look at it today, and it's obvious that the Warren Commission, which was the first investigation, clearly was a whitewash. Then later on in 1979, the American state effectively had a brief reinvestigation and produced a paper which actually did conclude that there was a high probability that there were other gunmen, and that therefore it was a wider coup d'etat in essence. But then it just sort of left that hanging. It sort of blamed the mafia. It didn't really go into the detail, and that's where it got left. So, actually the official view is it almost certainly was a wider conspiracy. But they're hoping the public will forget all about it and, move on to other things.
Yeah, it's a taboo subject. Be a little even nervous to talk about it, but I'll be all right. Everything will be all right. Because my friend even brought it to my attention that in the footage, he says that if you look closely in the footage, he says shortly after he gets the first couple of shots, he said you can see the driver of the car he was in turn around and shoot with the gun, the driver himself. So that's just another one of those odd, crazy things.
Yeah, I mean, that's the theory. The driver was a man called William Greer. And he sort of turns around, and some claim that he's firing another shot at close quarters. But I have to say there are some people that don't agree with that. And certainly I think the evidence that other snipers were firing from other buildings is strong, or at least the grassy knoll, which is this raised area in Dealey Plaza in Dallas where the shooting took place, where there was like a wall and a fence there, and many people sitting near there claimed that they heard shots coming from over there. And the evidence actually is strong. But again, by not fully investigating, they've managed to leave it so vague that here we are, 50 whatever years on, we're never going to be fully sure. But I think if you look at the polls, I think around 60% of people believe that Kennedy was killed by more than one gunman. So most people do believe it was a conspiracy in the true sense of the word, and not just one maniac.
I'm going to share something with you. I've told a lot of my friends here in the States this over a period of years. Back in the year 2000, I wish I would have wrote down the exact date, but it was in the summertime. And one of my routines I do in the morning is I crack my garage open, give me some tea, have me a cigarette or whatever. But one day, I was looking at the clouds outside, and believe it or not, the clouds, it looked like a mountain. Then the next thing I know, the clouds started moving, and it turned into Martin Luther King in the sky. And it was like Martin Luther King from his chest up, and he was looking up and he was looking down directly at me in the window. And then shortly after that, it turned into John F. Kennedy. And then
Wow.
shortly after that, it turned into Winston Churchill. I was closing my eyes. I was looking away, rubbing my eyes, looking back up, still there. And this whole thing lasted for about 20 minutes. It stayed each person for about 3 minutes, and it kept going to different people. It was Martin Luther King, it was John F. Kennedy, it was Winston Churchill, it was Malcolm X, and then it was Joseph Stalin. And then the last person it turned into, I always forget his name, but it was like a Chinese looking man that had like hair on the side of his head, and he was bald on the top of his head. And then shortly after that, it turned back into a mountain, and that blew me away. And I don't know if it was a vision or it was some type of hologram technology that they were testing, but I seen that with my own eyes. And slowly but surely, man, I told people. At first, I didn't tell anybody about that, but then I started telling people about it. My grandfather said that he thinks I'm supposed to be a pastor. And one thing that I did realize, all those people, what they all had in common is they were all great speakers. So that's just one of the strange things that happened to me. And like, I seen John F. Kennedy made up out of the clouds perfectly in detail. It was just crazy. So
Well, I'll tell you what's quite interesting about that is, I mean, there is actually a long history of apparitions of famous figures appearing in the sky, and often with a lot of witnesses as well. I mean, it's funny, you mentioned Joseph Stalin there. I don't know if you're aware, but Elvis Presley, obviously, he kind of had a spiritual sort of like moment of revelation when he and some friends were driving. This was in his later years, and they saw a cloud that looked exactly like Stalin in the sky, and he thought that this was some kind of, message about these were the forces we needed to oppose. So there's an Elvis story. But if you go back to the World Wars, I mean, in the Second World War, there are reports of people seeing, like, the armies marching through the sky, which was supposed to give hope to them. And in the First World War, there's more than one tale of angels being seen over battlefields, again, supposedly to encourage the men there. And there are, not just a few witnesses, there are many witnesses in some cases. So, this is a phenomenon, and where it's coming from, we don't know. But it's fascinating that you've actually, had that experience yourself.
yes, I did. And one person I did leave out, just pop back in, was Hitler. Hitler was up there too. As crazy as it may sound, it was Hitler, and he was up there and he was moving his arms around, and little pieces of the cloud were like coming off of his arms and his shoulder. And he was up there and he was doing his thing where he's like all like this. And like I said, one thing I noticed, they were all great speakers, but at the same time, I did realize too that it seemed like there were good people and there were bad people.
Sure.
So it's kind of like, you decide, you can be good or bad. So that I just want to mention that, yeah, Hitler was up there too. It's crazy. And one day I'm gonna try to get somebody to do a cartoon reanimation of exactly what I saw, and I'm gonna put it out there more to let people know about it. Because I tell you, I've probably only told that story to a handful of people, probably about less than 100 people, but not a whole world will know.
I mean, out of interest, can I ask you, do you know what year that was? When did that occur?
It was the summertime of the year 2000, and it was either like July or August. I remember it was the summertime, and I wish I would have wrote down the exact date. Now there's a little more to the story. I'll tell you how the story started. When I opened my garage and I was smoking my cigarette and drinking my tea, out of nowhere, I just heard it seemed like there was somebody right by my ear said, "The clouds are in full stride today," right? Like I heard, and it was like a deep voice that said, "The clouds are in full stride today." I turn around, nobody's there. I opened up my garage. I went outside, nobody's there. So I closed the garage back down a little bit. I went inside my house in the backyard. Look in the backyard, nobody there. Just a little small window in my my garage. So I looked out there too, and it's early in the morning. Nobody's out. And then I sat back down, and I was thinking about. I was like, man, I'm hearing stuff. So something just told me to go get up and look out the window. So I went up, I looked out the window, and I seen this white billowy cloud that looked just like a mountain. It was like perfect billowy cloud, and like you just run up to it and jump on it. And then next thing I know, it seemed like claymation, like the cloud just went boom, and then it became Martin Luther King. And I was like, I was looking at my cigarette. I was looking at my cigarette like, what is this? But anyway, yeah. But that really happened, and yeah. But
amazing.
And you told me that Elvis seen Stalin. I had never heard that story before. Wow, I'm gonna check that out. I'm gonna look into that. Because I seen it with my own eyes.
Sure.
Now, Andy, Princess Diana, I remember when she passed away when I was a lot younger. The rumor is it because she might have been caught cheating on her husband is why that she was taken out the way she was, or do you think it was truly just an accident? Car accident.
Well, I mean, so Princess Diana, this is one of the famous conspiracy theories, certainly in England. It's a big one over here. I mean, the majority of English people, if you believe the polls, believe that she was murdered, that the car crash was in some way organized. So, I mean, in my book, Conspiracies, there's quite a long chapter about this because it's something that so many people feel very strongly about. Now, the truth is she had already split with Prince Charles before the crash, so they were already apart. She was not comfortable with some of the relationships that he was having. She believed, and we have her letters which prove this, that there was a plot to kill her. And she believed that actually Charles wanted to marry a lady called Tiki Leg Bourke. Now, she was nanny to William and Harry, the princes, when they were young. And it was Diana's view, rightly or wrongly, it was Diana's view that Charles wanted to marry her, but felt that both Diana and Camilla were getting in the way. And it's weird because Camilla Parker Bowles, who is now married to Prince Charles, Duchess of Cornwall, she had a crash not long before Diana did. And she was driven off the side of the road near the country lanes near her home. She scrambled out and she sort of ran away from the scene, which you're not meant to do. And the word at the time was she had feared that maybe somebody was trying to kill her. Now, you don't hear about that anymore, but if you find the original newspaper reports, there it is. And what's intriguing about that is some people wonder, did they try to get rid of her? Having failed to get rid of Camilla, they decided they'd get rid of Diana instead, because in fact she was stirring up a lot of trouble about this and telling people there was a plot to kill her and whatever. She was also, of course, at that stage going out with a man called Dodi Al-Fayed. Now, Dodi Al-Fayed, his mother is a Samira Khashoggi. In the Khashoggi family, they're a big arms dealing family in the world. And one theory is that, they didn't want a peacenik joining them at the dinner table, if you like. And a lot of people did wonder, was Diana pregnant with Dodi's baby? Now, that would introduce an interesting Muslim bloodline into the royal family. And some have argued that there were forces out there that didn't want that. And so, therefore, that's another reason why they got rid of Diana. You'll find there's lots of possible reasons why people might have wanted to kill her. But, of course, that's all theory. It then comes down to looking at the circumstances of the crash and seeing whether there was anything strange or whether this is all just paranoia. But actually, when you look at it, there are some strange things about the crash, which, we can talk about if you want. Sure.
Floor is yours. Like I said, I as soon as you mentioned the name Dodi, I remembered his name. But yeah, what was suspicious?
So, well, I mean, at the time, the story is officially that the driver was very drunk.
Right, I remember that.
Then the car was speeding away from the paparazzi, and then he lost control in an underpass in a tunnel in Paris. Okay, so that's the official story. But there's no good video evidence showing him drunk. He seems perfectly normal on all the cameras that night. Not a single witness, to my knowledge, ever came forward and said he was drunk. So that's an anomaly. The blood sample that apparently proved that he was drunk was not his blood. The authorities, they admitted they made a mistake, that they mixed him up with somebody else. So, we've got that aspect to it, but they say they did other tests and he definitely was drunk. Then, if you believe that toxicology report, you have to say that he was so drunk he shouldn't have been able to have got out of bed that day, let alone appear normal and drive a car. So there are many anomalies about that. And then in the crash itself, there were many reports of a strange bright flash from within the tunnel, and we do know that there was a white Fiat, a car, which in some way touched the Mercedes in which they were in, because it left its paint on the side of the Mercedes, which they found, of course, after the crash. But it got away, it sped away. Now, you would think, wouldn't you, it would be really important to know who owned that white Fiat. And yet, for I think one of the few times in history, would you believe, all the security cameras in that part of Paris were off that night, not working. So, of course, the French authorities said they couldn't trace the car. But weirdly, Dodi Al-Fayed's father, who was a man called Mohammed Al-Fayed, who used to own, Harrods, which is a big shop in London, he wasn't happy with that. And he hired private detectives. And he claimed that he tracked down the owner of the white Fiat, and it was a man called James Andanson. And the strange thing is, although James Andanson claimed he was nothing to do with it, as you probably would, shortly after being exposed, he was found dead in another car. And, he seemed to have what looked like a bullet hole in his head. He'd been decapitated, and the car had been set light to, clearly from the outside. And yet, incredibly, the French authorities managed to conclude that that was suicide.
No.
Now,
it's too much of a coincidence. No.
This is what we're dealing with here, though. The level of denial in officialdom here is quite extraordinary. So nobody thought that that was strange, or at least if they did, they weren't going to go there. And so, there's many things. We also know when she was brought out of the crash, she was taken to a Parisian hospital. Now, yes, she was badly injured, but she was expected, apparently, to survive. The French doctors thought she was going to pull through. But the story is, according to some of the French staff, that in the middle of the night, the British doctors came and said, well, she's our jurisdiction. Thanks very much. We'll take over from here. And they escorted the French staff out of the room. And according to the French staff, when they came out and announced that Diana had died, they were so shocked because they thought she was going to survive, that there was a suspicion among them that, maybe these guys who turned up in the middle of the night had made sure that Diana had died. And one of them was going to write an account of what he had written, of what he had seen that night, and he was going to write a book about it. And then shortly after announcing this, he dies in a strange car crash. Now, look, I can't 100% prove that's true, but this is the word. And when you put it all together, it does seem strange. And a lot of people feel in their gut there's something just too odd about all the circumstances around Diana's death.
Yes, rest in peace to Princess Diana, because I remember when I was younger, she seemed like such a sweet person, was a nice person. And I know she used to do a lot of good things for children and stuff like that, so.
Yeah, I think she was a genuine person. I mean, I think she had her faults like all human beings do, but certainly, she made a lot of friends, but sadly, she also made a lot of enemies. And there certainly would have been people with grounds to want to get rid of her, as is sadly always the case. I mean, Martin Luther King, another good example. Kennedy, again, perhaps many think that he was going to be a force for good in the world, and that was not in alignment with what the New World Order wanted. And he put so many noses out of joint, as they say, that, again, they were queuing up to get rid of him by the end. So sadly, if you do raise your head above the parapet too far, you will have people wanting to remove you. It's a sad fact of history.
Yes, and I just want to let the men in black out there know, don't mess with Andy, don't mess with me. We're just having conversations, so please.
Listen, I mean, I think we need to not worry too much. This stuff is out there. There's nothing we're saying here that is not already known. We're just sharing information that's already out there in the collective. The people that I think do need to worry are the ones that tend to be witnesses to things, like some of the people who were near the grassy knoll at the shooting of Kennedy. Quite a few of those seemed to die mysteriously early as time went by. Some people on 9/11 who claim to have witnessed things which contradict the official story have also died mysteriously early. Now, that isn't proof of anything, but it's interesting. And, it does seem that, there's a fair amount of people that will be threatened if they actually witness something directly. You and I, we're just more nutcases that can be dismissed. It's the people that know stuff that nobody else knows. They tend to be the ones that need to worry.
Yeah, 9/11 is a big conspiracy. I watched that in real time, watching the news. I didn't see the first plane hit, but I saw the second plane hit live on TV. And then shortly after that, still watching the news, of course, because it was all going on. And there was a man. I wish I could find this footage, because there was a man, I believe they were broadcasting from inside the Pentagon. And this man was talking. And as he was talking on camera, boom, you see him go like this. And, you see like the back shaking. And I believe he was inside the Pentagon, wherever he was broadcasting from, when apparently the second plane or the missile projectile or whatever it was that hit the Pentagon. Because if a plane actually hit the Pentagon, where is the plane at? Absolutely no wreckage. So that's like another strange thing that happened here on that day.
Yeah, I mean, 9/11 is a very emotive subject, and some people don't want to hear it questioned, and I understand that. But when you do look at the evidence, I'm afraid the official story really doesn't stand up. And as you say, there are so many anomalies. Now, I mean, if you look at the footage of the Pentagon, I mean, there is some wreckage in some photographs, but some people say it almost looks like they've come and put it on the lawn. If you read, the original reports and you watch the original reports of people that you can still find on YouTube if you know where to go, the amount of people that said it was really weird at the Pentagon. There was no luggage, there were no bodies, minimal debris. It was like something small hit that building. And yet we're told that it was a 757 hitting it. But the evidence for that is extremely scant. And even the trajectory it took to hit that building doesn't make sense if it was a 757, because it somehow, if we believe the official story, managed to turn this incredibly steep curve in the middle of the air at 500 miles per hour without breaking up. Now, I have met pilots who've told me you can't do that in a 757. You can't do that kind of acrobatic stuff in it. And weirdly, I mean, instead of coming just straight down and taking out this great big bullseye that the Pentagon offers, it went out of its way to hit the one part of the Pentagon that was under renovation that day, where there weren't actually that many people. And it's almost as if at the Twin Towers, maximum carnage was required, whereas at the Pentagon, they were trying to limit it. Now, these are accusations, of course, but when you look at the evidence, it's hard to entirely dismiss this. And then you hear that the man piloting that plane into the Pentagon was allegedly an Al-Qaeda terrorist called Hani Hanjour. Now, even the flight school in America that inadvertently trained this guy, even they say he was one of the worst pilots they'd ever trained. Right? He could hardly handle a light aircraft. And yet on 9/11, we are meant to believe that he performed the most extraordinary feat of aviation acrobatics probably in history. It doesn't make sense. And then you put that together with the physics of the way the towers collapse, people who said on the day they heard bombs going off inside the buildings, the very strange fact that they just dissolved into dust, the footage showing what looks very like demolition devices of some kind going off to many experts. The whole thing doesn't make sense if they were natural collapses. So whatever aspect you look at with 9/11, you've got anomalies. And sometimes you can ignore anomalies. You always get a few. But when they stack up as much as they do with 9/11, I do think it's very hard to explain them all away. And again, in my book, Conspiracies, I spend quite a lot of time analyzing 9/11 because so many people are resistant to talking about it. But when you actually look at the evidence, you realize there's something really wrong here. And of course, the central accusation is that, whether bin Laden was or wasn't involved, he was certainly helped to make this as successful as it was, and that certainly the truth is not being told about what went on that day, and that is why conspiracy theories about 9/11 will carry on, I'm afraid to say.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm looking over. I believe these are some chapters of your book. Something that's new to me, the QAnon movement. Do you think they are just stirring up conspiracies? Do you think they're taking stories and flipping it around? Because I just seen this thing about them saying that like Tom Hanks is like he's a pedophile and things like that. Do you think they are just propaganda?
Yes, I mean, for anybody that is listening that doesn't know, so QAnon is a deep state mole, apparently, or a collection of moles who do work deep down, not only in the US government, but also, in the darker areas below it, black ops, perhaps. And they say, and they have been releasing information, that the New World Order is a conspiratorial plot, not just a kind of happy collection of countries. And they say that it does want complete domination and control. And in fact, QAnon say that President Trump is out to destroy the New World Order. So it effectively supports Trump by saying, look, he's a force for good. The New World Order, they want to denigrate Trump because he is a threat to them. And actually, I mean, some of this, you mentioned David Wilcox earlier on, some of this is coming out at the moment where some claim that QAnon is implying that there is going to be an exposure of the people in the world who are trying to foment the New World Order plot, and that they will actually be held to account and rounded up. Now, that in many ways would be a great thing if it happened, but that's where others say this sounds too idealist. This doesn't sound fully true. And the problem we've got is, as you say, I mean, QAnon have made a lot of very serious accusations about well-known people. They also, I think, effectively were the source on, I don't know if you remember, the Pizzagate claims. Now, that was a claim that there was a paedophile ring in America being gathered from pizza restaurants. Now, nobody has ever come forward and actually been a witness to this. It's a theory, and some people believe it's true. But what some worry about is that maybe QAnon is actually a way of discrediting conspiracy theories, that they're making up wild theories which at some point will be revealed to be untrue, and thus bring down, by association, all conspiracy theories. So you've got two views. Some people think it's a force for good and it's going to reveal the truth. Others worry that it is a setup. So, as ever, how do you know? It's an extremely difficult thing to know for sure. But as yet, I think they're going to have to release a lot more clear information to prove what they're saying is true than we are getting at the moment. Some things do seem to be quite well informed, but, that's not proof, and more proof will be needed before people know quite whether to trust QAnon or not. But it's become a really big movement. I mean, at some rallies, political rallies, you may have seen over there on your TV screens, people holding up a big letter Q from the crowds. If you see that, that is a QAnon follower, basically saying we need to look at QAnon. So it's got quite big.
Time will tell, won't it?
Let's hope so. Although sometimes time doesn't tell and things move on and they don't get resolved. But maybe we shall see.
Yeah, they say time will tell. It's the biggest snitch, About Donald Trump, there's been a lot of people saying that he is going to be the president to release the information about UFOs and aliens and visitations. They say that he's been groomed to be the president to release that type of information to the people. What's your take on that? And also, I just want to add on another part to that. What's your take on him being the president to release that type of information? And also, what do you think about those Simpson cartoons where they seem to show Donald Trump going down the elevator, waving and all that, and then years later, it actually happens almost exactly the way the cartoon was years ago? What do you think about all that?
I think The Simpsons was probably just happy accident. I mean, maybe they could see this guy was going to get big. I think it was meant as a joke. I don't think let's hope anyway. They didn't think that they would be right. They were just having a laugh. But there you go. But other people think he's wonderful, and they feel he does offer a new hope because he doesn't really work with the establishment. He is a wild card, and I know some people don't like that about him, but others think that's his strength, that he's quite hard to control in the way that perhaps other presidents have been controlled, because, this is a guy that, just puts out what he thinks on a tweet instantly. So that's quite a difficult force to control, and some think that that's one of his strengths. Others, of course, they don't like him at all and they want to get rid of him, as you know. But what I would say is, so about UFOs, there is a string, or has been a string, of presidents who've kind of implied they will release documents on UFOs or make the big announcement, and they've never quite got round to it. Jimmy Carter, back in the 70s, Jimmy Carter had his own UFO experience. Yep. Now, there was hope that he would therefore instigate some kind of big investigation. Well, if he did, it didn't get far. And then, of course, even Hillary Clinton, as part of her promise in her campaign, had said she would try and, get new disclosure about UFOs. I don't think a lot of people never took that seriously. And of course, we never got to find out whether that was true or not. Whether Trump will, well, hard to say. But certainly there are people like Ronald Reagan. They have made comments about UFOs. He famously gave a speech saying if we were to learn of a big outside threat from aliens, that would pull the world together to work together to fight them. And there is also a story, and okay, I do not know if it's true, but it's widely reported that Reagan was present at a screening of Steven Spielberg's film E.T., the Extraterrestrial. And apparently when the screening finished, Reagan turned around to Spielberg and said, "You don't know how true this is." Almost as if, he was aware that actually stuff like this really was going on. So, clearly presidents in the past have been fascinated by this. But as yet, for all the kind of hints and promises, and even, remember Kennedy had recommended that Russia and America share information on UFO sightings, so it goes back a long way. But it never really seems to come to anything. And it may well be until the day that there is some absolutely undeniable sighting seen by thousands of people all at the same time. It's probably not a vote winner for an American government or any government to absolutely come out with all the UFO information, because I would imagine they would fear that people would be afraid. And I think some would. Not everybody. Some would love it and welcome it. But yeah, I think there would be a certain fear factor if it was officially announced they were coming. And of course, you would then get people that wouldn't even believe what they were being told. There is a theory out there that there might be a faked alien invasion to make us think aliens are coming, to give the powers that be more control. And of course, that's quite apt, because here we are today. We've got the coronavirus crisis around us. You've got it. We've got it. Big problem. Some people think that not so much that it isn't real, I know some have said that, but that it's being used to give governments a lot more power, and that when it's all over, they're going to have way too much power. And there is evidence for that. Certainly, here in Britain now, we've got literally a police state. We've got the police flying drones over people, telling them to go indoors. They've got incredible powers to arrest people now. All these things that many people have feared for years. And we've given them these powers very quickly because, of course, we're all afraid and we all want to be protected. But some worry that when the virus has done its worst and passed its way through, that they will hang on to those powers. So, there's always been this belief that something could be used to frighten us, whether it be aliens, coronavirus, or whatever, to give the powers that be enormous controls over us. And well, let's hope that's not true, and let's hope they do give some of the controls back afterwards. But this is always at the core of conspiracy thinking, the fear that somebody at the top is misleading the people for the purposes of power and control. And this is an old thing, and again, it goes back to the Roman Empire and probably beyond.
Yeah, I did hear rumors about a possible faked alien invasion where they might use hologram technology to scare people. I have heard that. Keeping on the subject of space, let's talk about the moon landings. A lot of people think the moon landings were fake. They believe that we didn't have the type of technology to make it to the moon back then. Some people think that we, as human beings, we can't even get past the Van Allen belts, and they think that that was all faked. Now, was there Stanley Kubrick? If I'm not mistaken, Stanley Kubrick. Apparently, I heard that the original footage is locked away in like a vault, and I think it's like it couldn't be released to the public for like 70 years for some reason. Have you heard anything about that and the moon landings being faked?
Yeah, so okay, so in my book Conspiracies, again, there's a long chapter about moon landings, because again, this is something that people get very emotive about. You know, this was a big achievement in the late 60s, early 70s. We had Vietnam raging, we had Watergate eventually broke, and you know, the moon landing seemed like a good balance to all of that. It was a positive thing. It was a sign of what mankind could do. So, of course, when people challenge that, as some, as you know, do, and a lot of people do in some countries, I think over 50% of the population doesn't believe we went to the moon. So that's a lot of people. They say, looking at the evidence today with modern analysis techniques, it doesn't really look that it was taken on the moon, and people question the technology that they had. How did they survive the radiation? How did they make the photographs come out with a lot of radiation on the moon, with old 60s film and all of this? And the problem is that although I don't think you can stand there and definitively say we didn't go to the moon, you can say actually there are some anomalies in the moon landing evidence. There are things that are quite hard to explain. Now, you mentioned Stanley Kubrick. So, of course, Kubrick, very famous film director, and his film 2001: A Space Odyssey is rightly one of the classic movies. If you've never seen it, watch it, but watch it on a big screen. No point watching it on your phone. Watch it on a big screen. But here's the thing. It was a very good realization, and it was filmed in the mid to late 60s, of space travel, and a lot of it looked very convincing. And some wondered, was he used, or at least the techniques that he pioneered, were they used to fake some of or all of the moon landing footage? Now, my personal view, because I've been quite a fan of Kubrick over the years, is I don't believe he would have allowed himself to get pulled into that kind of thing. He had other things to do. But I do think it is more than possible that the techniques his special effects teams were using were used. And there is certainly some evidence that at least some of those pictures are not real. And I mean, we know there are some pictures out there which have been in the public domain which turned out not to be real. I mean, a classic, there is an image of the astronaut Michael Collins spacewalking from one of the Gemini craft in the mid-60s. And that was held to be a real image until some years later, somebody discovered in the NASA image bank a picture of Michael Collins in a test aeroplane. And it's absolutely the same picture. And they've cut around him and they've stuck him on a black background. Now, that's how cheap and nasty that is. And there's another one. There's a shot of the astronauts playing golf on the moon. That is a fake image. It's made up from provably montage bits of other images. So you've got things like that. Even the classic photograph we all know of Buzz Aldrin standing on the moon, even that's doctored, because NASA have added in a bit of extra black sky at the top and just adjusted a few little things to make for a better composition. And the problem is, well, then how do we know that they didn't do that to all of them? And, you know, there are some problems. And you mentioned, the Van Allen belts, radiation. Now, maybe we can get through them, maybe. But you'd think that the astronauts that went to the moon and back would have been much more prone to cancer, for instance, than many other demographics. But apparently not. They seem to come back all fine. When you look at footage of, say, the first crew that landed on the moon, Apollo 11, if you look at the press conferences, and you can find this easily on YouTube, these do not look like men overjoyed to have been on the moon. They look depressed. They look very strange. They look like they've just been told they can't tell the truth, or they've been mind controlled or something. It's very, very weird. And that isn't proof of anything. But then you look at the anomalies in the pictures, problems with shadows, lighting, problems with objects being in the wrong place, and the absence, for instance, of any blast, any crater, any soot underneath the lunar modules that came down on several £1,000s worth of thrust. These are anomalies. And I know that some people in the science world get very, very angry when people question it. But to be fair, there are things that have not been adequately explained. And until they are adequately explained, these arguments are going to go on.
Yeah, there's no dust on the gold landing gears. And also, a lot of those pictures, the type of cameras that they were using, those cameras had those little black lines that look like plus symbols, little markers. And in some of the pictures, you could see that some of those little plus-looking marks seem like they're chopped out a little bit, like they messed up when they were chopping. So which makes no sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, well, those little crosshair things, they're called reticles, and they were created to sort of calibrate, scale and, exactly how the pictures were taken. But no, you're right. There are some images where it looks in some cases, the reticles are behind objects, where it's like something's been pasted onto it. Now, NASA will argue, no, it's just the way the light's falling. It's so you can't see it in that and so on. But no, there are problems in some cases. You've also got incredibly obvious things, like there's a picture or a few pictures of the lunar rover, which they took on later missions to the moon. And this is the little buggy thing that they drove around, where you see it sitting on the moon, and the records show that it had already been used, and there's no tire tracks to it. So it's like it's sitting there and there's no tire marks, and you think, hang on, how did they drive that through all this dust and not leave a mark? And then you watch some of the video, and when you watch the buggy sort of zooming around, you see what should be very, very fine moon dust, and you would imagine this would just hang sort of before it falls down to the ground. You see it sort of plopping down to the ground like wet sand. Well, now moon dust shouldn't do that, because there's no wetness up there at all. This should be, just very, very light and powdery. And that's not what it looks like. And some people believe that the videos, not just the still images, may also have been faked. Because if you basically speed those images up, some believe that all they did was film it in an air hangar somewhere and just slowed the footage down slightly to make it look like it's in 0G. Now, if you just speed it up slightly, it just looks like they're being completely normal in completely normal Earth gravity. And some believe that's, in fact, how it was all done. Now, look, I don't know. I'm not saying we didn't go to the moon. I sort of hope that we did, because when I was a lad, I was very excited by this. But I do accept there are big issues with some of the evidence. And again, it's a bit like the other conspiracies we've been talking about today. Whatever you conclude, they have not been straight about the evidence that we went to the moon. They've doctored it, they've done things to it, and then you have to say why. Was it that they did go and they couldn't ever make the pictures come out, so they had to show the Soviets something and had to recreate them in a studio? Was it that they did go and they couldn't show what they found? A lot of astronauts claim they saw UFOs on various missions. Or did they not go? They tried to go, couldn't pull it off, and they just had to show the world that they did, because it would have been too humiliating not to have done. You have to decide for yourself where the truth lies. But I do recommend people do really look at the evidence before dismissing it too quickly. And I know some people get very, very angry when you say this, but in my view, I think there are arguments that do deserve further consideration.
Yeah, the main thing with me is I always wonder why we never went back.
Sure. I mean, that is another thing. Now, here we are. They keep talking about new moon missions. We are meant to be sending men to the moon currently now in 2024, although that's just been set back because of the coronavirus. Now, some think that might be a useful excuse, but why have we not been back before? Why is it that every date ever given for going back is always then put back further and further, when it was so easy to go in the 60s? Because in the 60s, apparently within 10 years, we found the technology to go in these very fragile tin cans, and they went there and they came back and they seemed to get away with it. Apollo 13 went a bit wrong, but, on the whole, it was all right. And yet somehow we've never bothered to go back. And now some of the reasons they've given for why it's taking so long to go back is they don't know how to protect the astronauts from radiation. They don't quite know how to make these missions safe. And you think, yeah, but it wasn't a problem in the 60s.
Right.
So why is it now suddenly a problem with all our modern technology? And it does begin to look suspicious, it must be said, because there are, I think, you know, especially now with the technology we have today, there are probably minerals and things on the moon that you could make a lot of money from. Because one argument's been, well, there's no real benefit of being on the moon. I would imagine there are huge benefits and huge military benefits as well. So for them just to say that they don't care that much, that doesn't wash either. So yes, it's this very, very strange thing all around.
Yeah, they said that the Nazis had a base on the backside of the dark side of the moon.
Listen, I mean, there's a lot of claims about this. There are also claims that the US, maybe other countries, already have bases on Mars and the moon, and they've been out there for years, and that's one of the things they're trying to cover up. There are certainly aerial shots, orbital shots of Mars and the moon, which do seem to show some very strange objects, which, you know, we're always sure are natural, but some people analyze them and they don't think they are. So yeah, there's a whole other theory there that we've been out there for years and they've been hiding the real space program. I mean, again, absolutely proving this one way or the other is very hard, but I do think it's fascinating to consider them. And certainly some of the evidence, yeah, you look at it and you think, well, that can't be entirely dismissed.
Absolutely. Just want to say hi to, I got a few people on my Facebook Live watching the live recording right now. We're sitting down with Andy Thomas out in the United Kingdom in Britain. We're sitting talking conspiracies, and this video will be up on the YouTube channel. I see all you guys popping in, checking on. If anybody has a question for Andy, please put the question in. Now, Andy, again, off camera, I was telling you about the video I sent you from David Wilcock. Oh, guys, make sure you check his website, truthagenda.org. The video from Andy Wilcock, he was saying, will you please
David Wilcock.
David Wilcock, please. I get a little nervous on camera sometimes. I get a little caught up. But he was saying, you know, I was telling you about the whole disclosure thing that may soon come with these advanced technologies. He was saying, believe it or not, he was saying that they've discovered Atlantis up under Antarctica. And apparently there's all these different types of technologies that they discovered there too, and they're finally going to release this information to the public very soon, maybe within the next year or two, like really soon. All those, there's like countries all around the world, they all took a little slice of Antarctica, and I always wondered, you know why they did that. Like you can't even go to the bathroom on Antarctica. You can't contaminate anything there. Do you think Antarctica could be there under the ice? And you think that technology could have survived?
What is true is that there has been a lot of strange activity in Antarctica. There have been all kinds of missions, all kinds of famous people flying down there, including, by the way, the astronaut Buzz Aldrin, mysteriously. And it's almost as if they are going down to look at something that isn't just pretty scenery or environmental stuff about Antarctica. It is almost as if there is something there they're calling in the experts to give opinions on. So the current running theory is that, yeah, as you say, they've discovered something, some technology, either from our deep past or extraterrestrial, buried under the ice, which, of course, everybody wants to get their hands on. Now, proving this, it is another matter. But it is certainly something that has been noticed. There's been a lot of activity, and beyond normal, beyond just oil prospecting. You know, it does seem like there's something there that they're very interested in getting their hands on. I mean, whether or not it is Atlantis is another matter. I mean, David Wilcox, now interestingly, he believes he is a reincarnation of Edgar Cayce. And Edgar Cayce was, one of these early 20th century kind of seers. He was a prophet, if you like. And he did say that at some point in these modern times, Atlantis would rise again. It would be rediscovered. So Wilcox, he's got his own kind of connection with that because he believes. And funnily enough, he does look a little bit like Edgar Cayce if you look at the pictures.
I was just going to say that he does look like him too.
Yes, I mean, well, who knows? But yeah, so it would be kind of lovely if something was suddenly discovered right now that gave us the ability to put a lot of things right. Because I know there's people out there that worry at the moment. We've got the virus, there's a lot of bad things going on, and they worry we're heading for the apocalypse. I'm a bit more optimistic than that. I worry about how governments might try and take more control by basically not giving us the truth and trying to create more of an Orwellian society. But I also have faith in people's innate ability to want liberty and freedom. It's something very deep within human beings. And it would be very, very nice if something were to be discovered that would suddenly create a new perspective. And actually, instead of just looking always at the end of the world, which everybody seems fixated on, looking at the beginnings of new worlds that we can create. And I mean, what might come out of what's going on with the virus at the moment is certainly a better world where we start to think about community again. We look at the way the economy works. What we worry about is that people will try and abuse it. But if enough people try and come out of this with some kind of positive attitude, we might get somewhere. And maybe the rediscovery of Atlantis was not ever meant to be a physical thing, but it was actually kind of a spiritual reawakening, a kind of a reconnecting with more ancient spiritual values. And on that, yeah, could well happen. So, here we go. We're in the realm of people, hoping something big's around the corner. And whether you see that in religious terms or scientific terms or just the human spirit, there is always hope. And I think we need to remind ourselves of that when things are all currently very strange.
Thank you, Andy, for that. Now, this is something I'm noticing on your page, and this is something, and I apologize, maybe I was just out of the loop, or maybe we didn't get too much press about this over here, or maybe I just wasn't paying attention, but the Salisbury nerve gas attack. What is the conspiracy behind that?
Okay, so we would call it Salisbury here, and Salisbury is a very ancient city, and it's got a famous cathedral with a very tall spire there. And in centuries past, many famous archbishops have done a lot of important stuff there. So, we've had a series of accusations made against the Russians that they have been sort of slowly trying to take out various ex-agents who've defected from Russia, or they've helped the West against Russia and who are now living in Britain. So there was one famous case when one of them was poisoned with radioactive polonium a few years ago and died. That was a big scandal. And of course, the British government blamed the Russians for that. There have been other cases. But yeah, so the big one you're referring to there is, so about 2 years ago, there was what seemed to be a nerve gas attack. So a nerve agent. This is really deadly stuff. You do not want to touch it. And there was an ex-Russian agent called Skripal, and he and his daughter, it seems that somebody, if we believe the official story, left a nerve agent on the door handle of their house, which of course, the minute you touch it, you are then going to be badly ill, and indeed they were. Now, in fact, they both did survive, so some think it didn't work as well as it was planned. However, it was immediately accused very quickly that this was a Russian nerve agent. There were 2 Russian tourists who were later identified, apparently, as Russian military men. Russia denies all of this. Putin absolutely denies all of this, as you would. But of course, this has enabled, again, a kind of a new demonization of Russia, certainly here in Britain. However, the trouble is there are some people that are not sure if the Russians did do it. If you look at the way this nerve gas was spread, it's a very strange thing. This is a very deadly thing. Apparently, it was just kept in a perfume bottle in a carrier bag. You don't generally carry nerve agents around in a perfume bottle. The smallest leakage and you are also in trouble. These guys on the cameras, they're not wearing any kind of protective gear. They're just wearing normal gear. There are anomalies about what time they went to the house, and if you look at CCTV, there's many things that don't quite add up. So the accusation is that this could be potentially a false flag, that we were meant to think that Russia did it, as I'm sure they have done some dubious things in the past, but that certainly it enabled the British government to turn against Russia, funnily enough, at a time when President Trump was being accused of being too close to Russia. So some think that this was an attempt to kind of put clear space between us in Britain and the Trump approach. We don't know the truth is absolutely the case. We can't, as ever, knowing the absolute truth of these conspiracies assertions is very difficult. But there are strange holes in the official story. And although the British government say they have absolute proof that it was the Russians, that proof has never been delivered to the public, not convincingly in the eyes of many.
I have a question from one of my friends here on Facebook. They wanted me to ask you, with all the different type of research that you're doing, conspiracy theories, have you ever been threatened, or has anybody, tried to go after you for the work that you've been doing?
I mean, this comes back to what we were saying earlier. Yeah, it's a question that I get asked quite a bit. No, not to my knowledge, not yet. And I think the problem is that if the powers of the world were to target all the conspiracy theorists one by one, number one, there's other people they should be getting before me. Number two, it then actually would draw attention to the fact that there clearly was a conspiracy. In my view, it's easier to leave people like myself and other people out there researching it alone, because the minute you start trying to harass them, of course, it just looks like they might be onto something after all, and that somebody's trying to stop them getting the truth out there. And I mean, one thing I do want to say very clearly here, I'm not an agitator. I'm not here calling for revolution. I believe in peaceful campaigning. I do believe that truth should be discussed and that we should have freedom of speech to investigate anything that feels right and proper to do. However, I'm not out there saying that we should go and smash the state, smash the system, because I don't even feel like that. I'd like to see it reformed. And by talking about conspiracies, I'm not trying to stir things up. I'm just trying to get stuff out on the table so a light can be shone into it and we can have balanced and sensible discussions about it. Because if we all do that, then this stuff, I think, becomes less threatening. And even the powers that be don't really need to feel threatened. If they came clean on some of this and said, look, all right, we didn't tell the truth about that, but here's why. Funnily enough, I think there'd actually be some understanding. But all the time that they clearly cover things up, all the time that they're plainly not telling us the truth, of course, it makes things worse, and it makes people then turn against them. And then you get the more extremist element that do try to undermine the government using not very good actions. So, I'm trying to do this in a very peaceful, sensible way, I hope, and in the only way that seems to make sense to me. So, look, I mean, if they're going to come and get me, they're going to come and get me. I'm not going to live my life in fear and paranoia, because I think we are controlled by fear. And the minute you give in to fear, then they're winning. And I don't want to give them that satisfaction anyway. So I shall carry on, put on the kettle, have a nice cup of tea and be normal, because otherwise you can just wind up shut away in your house, barring up the doors, thinking the world's out to get you. And then, well, there's nowhere to go after that, is there? So better not to do that. Be optimistic, be bright, get the truth out there, keep the conversations going, because if everybody does that, it becomes impossible to take this away. And there is certainly a program of censorship at the moment online, definitely, but the more people that keep this stuff circulating, the harder it's going to be for them to get away with it. So, be positive, keep going, and don't worry about that. And that's my approach. Absolutely.
And again, we're sitting here with Andy Thomas, UK's best known I'm about to chop that.
How about truth and mysteries researcher? That'll do.
Truth and mysteries research. Yes, absolutely. Mr. Thomas, and you are very well spoken and very educated. I imagine the education system over there in Britain is awesome, because you sound like you're highly educated and well spoken.
Listen, I'm somewhere in the middle. I mean, we have good and bad schools and good and bad education systems like any other country does. And obviously, it depends where you're born and what your class is and all of that. And there is unfairness in that, in your country and in our country. And there's always people trying to fix this. I've been lucky. I've had a reasonable upbringing, but, there's people way, way above me that know far more than I do with much better educations, but that doesn't really matter. You make the best of what you've got. And if everybody does that, you make the best of who you are, doesn't matter where you come from, and you speak your truth, then there's a power to that, and you'll never lose that. So, we get what we get, and the secret is to make the most of it.
Absolutely. Andy, believe me, I could sit here and talk to you for hours. I just checked the time. I know we're running a little over on the time. So I want to wrap it up here, and I want to thank you again. And is there anything you just want to let the world know? The mic is yours. I give you the mic.
Well, listen, we do live in very strange times. They're fearful times. There's obviously something out there which is doing not very nice things to people. Look after yourselves. But also, be aware that these situations can be used to control us by fear. Step back from the fear. Do what you need to do to protect yourself. But, I would say we'll come out of this and continually ask, is what we're being told the whole truth? If you feel that it isn't, try and have good, balanced conversations about that with anybody that will listen. Don't shout at them. Don't tell them that they have to believe anything, because the minute you do that, they won't believe you. That's human nature. Just offer your truths as an opportunity to look at something in a new way, and do not allow this information that we're chatting about here to be taken away, because there are people that would take all of this away from the online world, shut down websites, deplatform people. Let's not do that. And one way to avoid doing that is to stay, I think, reasonable in our approach, and not get too extreme. And that way the information will keep circulating and the truth will out. And if anybody's interested in my works, do look at the website. You've mentioned it, truthagenda.org. Read the book Conspiracies if you want a good point that brings all this together. It's out there. You find it easily on Amazon. And my book, The Truth Agenda, as well, which adds in more paranormal elements. But you look at the website, you can find out all about me, and there's lots of videos to watch. I'm out there on YouTube, lots of lectures, all kinds of interviews, and they go into much greater detail about all of this, of course. So yeah, have a look at the website, truthagenda.org.
Once again, Andy, I thank you for being here with me on the Live from Planet X podcast. I'm your host, Zaire, a.k.a. Robert. You guys keep it locked. I'm going to try to keep it interesting. Again, Andy, I thank you and salute you.
Thank you.
All right, Andy, I just stopped recording. I didn't know it ran so long. I know.